Oh, good lord. Right, Acropolis, and it's Ollie versus Aziz. And I'm in Bose, and there's lots of people here. So if you hear disparaging comments from the background, that'll be why. So Ollie in the bottom right here building nothing. Up in the top left, Aziz is building, gas first. These workers are waiting for the gas to finish, presumably. No, back to work they go. Overlord staying at home, best place for it. And we've got another Overlord building. So pretty hectic activity in the Zerg base. No workers in production for Ollie, and that is of some concern. Second pylon at this stage, I don't know. This is beginning to smell suspiciously like we don't know what we're doing. So this guy's in gas. These guys are just chilling out watching some pylons build. Over here, this guy is about to build something. What's it going to be? Thank goodness for that. Because, the other option there was a hatchery just there. We've seen that before in the EMS StarCraft tournament. And it doesn't go that well. So that is generally best avoided. So our Zerg player Aziz is building some workers, and I can't help but feel that will pan out extremely well for him. In Protoss land, not only are we not building workers, but we're letting several of them just slack off and stand about and do nothing. This isn't going to go well, is it? Look at them go. So back to work, you guys. Brilliant. So Gateway is about 3/4 of the way done. It's the 1.5 minute mark. So, this is all recoverable. The game is definitely not over yet. It's not over. Aziz now has got the spawning pool, so can start to build some lings. And with these 4 lings in production, that will mean that he has got enough lings to win the game. This little fella that's moving out is going to build a Nexus. So it's the early expo for the Protoss. Anything like before 2 minutes for a Protoss is pretty quick. I would have expected the Zerg to already have an expand at this point, but they don't just yet. No, had Aziz done any manner of scouting, he would know that these 4 lings on the other side of the map could actually wreak havoc. Normally 4 lings you'd be able to see off with your workers, but not if you haven't built any workers. So in general, 4 lings wouldn't threaten you because your main base at this stage of the game, you'd have 16 in minerals, you'd have 6 in gas, 22 workers just beats 4 lings pretty easily with very minimal losses, if any. However,
he's got one long distance mining as well.
Yeah, that guy's an easy pick off, and based on, I'd hate to generalise, but based on what we've seen so far, I dare say that those lings in the mineral line would do a lot of damage. But now that the Zealot's out, that changes everything. This Zealot is going to chase away that ling, and to be honest, Zealot surrounded by 4 lings, I think my money's on the Zealot. Zealot surrounded by 6 lings, I think the 6 lings will take it. So it's a bit, it's a bit hit and miss at this stage. Queen is up, but just deciding to save her energy for something. Lair is being sort of mutated, I suppose, is the word. And that lair that's going to allow sort of tier 2 units. That's going to allow things like hydralisks, mutalisks, flying stuff, and all other sort of tech choices. For the Zerg. As a Zerg player, the only thing you can build before your lair is lings and roaches. Okay. Well, there you go. See, six lings does beat 1 Zealot, turns out. If I'd have been a bit sharper, we could have seen what happened there, but I'm not. 2 more Zealots coming out. That's pretty much a win. So anything could happen at this stage. More production coming down for the Protoss. Gateways happening. The side core means that as well as Zealots, we can now build these exciting things. Stalkers, Sentries. I don't know about building Sentries. Sentries are spellcasters, and they're very good units. Sentries, they enable all sorts of good things. Guardian shields, force fields. Force fields are brilliant against things like lings, and also hallucinations. But unless you know what you're doing with the Sentries, they're probably just an unnecessary gas expenditure. Zealots and Stalkers, on the other hand, are very much A-click for the win. So in Zergland, I don't think we ever saw the speed upgrade. No, we didn't. So that is such an important upgrade to get as a Zerg player. No matter what your build is going to be, you always get speed for your lings. You just do. So that's kind of worth noting if you do play Zerg. Always get speed, always. This spine crawler is in a weird position. I suppose the plan here is to defend this ramp, but as a Zerg you need more bases. You need to have this hatchery up pretty quickly. And key reason for that is all of your units come from hatcheries, all of them. It's not like Protoss Terran where the Protoss is building units out of these gateways and only workers from the Nexus. As a Zerg you build your workers from the hatchery, but you also build your lings from the hatchery, you build your roaches from the hatchery. So if you've only got one hatchery, you've only got one production structure. All of these are tech structures. So Zerg always need to have more hatcheries than you would think. So even if you don't plan to mine from a base, it's really important that you build the base pretty early on. With that said, let's have a quick peek at army supplies. Well, actually very, very even. So a substantial worker lead for the Zerg, and we can see that does translate into a reasonable mineral income advantage as well. Baneling nest just done. That means that these lings can be turned into banelings that are little suicide bombers. They sort of self-destruct on contact with enemy units and do splash damage. So they're actually pretty badass, and they can be very, very useful against things like zealots, because zealots, any melee unit, they're going to be useful against. Yeah. Okay. So let's have a peek around here. Let's have a hello. Is that full zoom? It is. Let's have a little look around the base and see what we can spy and where we could be maybe improving things a little bit. At 6 minutes, you should definitely have more gas being mined, because you're going to find in general in StarCraft, gas is your limiting factor rather than minerals. And if we looked on here, we can see there's this huge mineral bank, but only 44 gas. So it's very hard to build stuff. Yeah, you can build zealots, but zealots on their own, unlikely to win you a game. You want to build higher tech units, you want to get upgrades and stuff, you're going to need gas. So that's the one serious thing that does need fixing. Also, more gateways. Look, you've got spare money. You could build 10 gateways right now, 10 literally. And what would you have lost by doing that? Literally nothing. And once those gateways are finished, as your income increases, now that you're on 3 bases, if you've got 10 gateways, well, then you can build loads of stuff at once. You can get to a big army quickly rather than having this one gateway cranking out units one at a time. You could be building units 10 at a time. So those are all things worth noting. These idle workers that are standing about the place, do remember that when you start the game, your Nexus automatically sends workers built to mine, but any Nexus you build after that does not. So you do have to tell them to go about their business. Otherwise, you see these guys are just popping out the front of the Nexus and hanging about. Let's have a look in the Zerg base. We're going for one of everything. So we've got one Corruptor, we've got one Overseer, we've got like 3 Roaches, we've got the Spire, the Baneling Nest, the Roach upgrades are happening. This sort of smacks of a player that doesn't really have any strategy in mind and is just going to build some stuff and hope for the best. The downside to that, there's nothing wrong with having variety in your army, but the downside to that is that if you've got a very diverse army, that requires a lot of diversity in the tech structures that you need, and it also means that upgrades aren't shared. So, for example, if you had a evolution chamber, if you upgrade melee, that'll help your lings, but it's not going to help your roaches, it's not going to help your corruptors. If you upgrade missile attacks, that's going to help your roaches, but it's not going to help your lings, and so on. So in terms of efficiencies, you're better to build units largely of the same type so that they benefit from the same upgrades. And obviously, if you've got a very diverse army, you've had to build all these structures. So you've had to build a spire, you've had to build a baneling nest. Those have all cost money that you could have spent on units instead. But the biggest problem, the overwhelming problem for Aziz at present, is that he's only got one base. You need to be expanding. But with that said, look at this mineral bank that's going on here. Spend that money. You've got workers. You've got larvae just waiting to be turned into stuff. So turn them into stuff. You've got these workers standing about doing nothing. Build a hatchery, build 2 hatcheries, 3 hatcheries, 4 hatcheries. Hell, you've got enough money to build 10 hatcheries. Actually, you don't. But, the point is you could build a lot of hatcheries and therefore build a lot of units at once. So it's a similar story to in Protoss land where we've still only got these 2 gateways. as a rule of thumb, you should never have more nexuses than gateways. That isn't right. What have you spotted?
Oh no, I was just asking what the unit in the middle of the map was.
I think it's her, overseer. Yeah, so normally as a Protoss, think if you're going to have a gateway heavy army, think 3 or 4 gateways per nexus is pretty standard. So by the time you're up in 3 bases, have 10 gateways certainly. And that's going to be absolutely fine. If you're going for a different composition, Robo or whatever, well then sure, the Robo takes the place of some of those gateways, and as does the Stargate. But yeah.
I mean, it looks like both players are going for the bingo units strats, where you just build everything and hope that something wins.
Yeah, arguably. It does look like it's going to be one of the types of games where both players are going to crank out a bunch of stuff. Eventually somebody is going to A-click across the map, and one of these two will win. Neither of them has the faintest idea what their opponent is doing. Literally not a clue. So some scouting did happen at one point, and Aziz knows that there's a pylon here. That is literally how much we're aware of as the Zerg player. Ollie, on the other hand, doesn't even know where his opponent is, which is terrifying. Army supplies, the army supplies aren't radically different, but they are beginning to diverge a little bit. It's these incomes that are, look, this is tailing off because Aziz is running out of minerals in the main base. You can see that we're down to just 4 mineral patches. And actually there's only 6 workers mining. So it's not going to be a problem instantly because we've got this enormous mineral bank of unspent resources. But sooner or later we're going to run out of stuff here. And what that means is when you lose this army, and trust me, you're going to lose that army, you won't be able to rebuild it. Now, with all of these crawlers going on here, if the Protoss does A-click across the map, there's every chance that is a disaster. Because what will happen is the stuff will come up the ramp here, who knows in what order. You'll have a couple of stalkers will stop to shoot things. All the zealots will be dancing and jiggling about behind that, trying to get up the ramp to fight, and they can't. And all of these crawlers and all of these roaches will just be raining down carnage upon that, and it all dies in the most miserable engagement imaginable. So let's hope we don't see that, because that'll depress me. These are Phoenix. I'm a big fan of Phoenix. They're an incredibly fast unit, not that you can tell when they're staying still. This is very much what Phoenix are not for. Phoenix, you don't park Phoenix. Phoenix are all about being fast, nimble, flying around the map, getting air superiority. They're about knowing what's on the map because they cover ground so quickly. They're about flying into your opponent's base to harass by picking up workers and killing them, to scout, to kill the odd unit here and there, and generally be a nuisance. In a straight up fight, the Phoenix also have some utility because they have their graviton beam, which can lift stuff up. Particularly effective against maybe units like siege tanks and stuff that are heavy hitters. So if you're attacking maybe into a Terran fortified position and you've got a handful of Phoenix within your army, you can use those Phoenix to lift up the siege tanks to reduce the damage output from your opponent. And their choice then is to either focus on the Phoenix to get those heavy hitters back, in which case your army isn't taking fire, or to ignore that and just try and fight on without their sort of siege tank backbone. So Phoenix are very, very useful at all points of the game, but as I say, only if you're being active with them. Now that the Zerg army has moved down here, I can't help but feel that this Protoss army just wins. If the Zerg army was up at the top of this ramp, this could be a very different story. So all of these sentries, and there are loads of them, not a single spell being cast, and that's a little bit disappointing. You can see that the Banelings did quite a lot of damage, but mostly just to shields. On the ramp is really where you don't want to fight, but at least now the Zealots are in front, so it's hard to tell really. This Void Ray is going to be shelling out a lot of damage to this stuff, pretty much unaffected because there's nothing here really shooting up. But, this is not an easy ramp to push up, at all. And sort of, yeah, this guy coming down can't even shoot when he's crawling about like that. And they're run away, there's a moving building, run, flee the scene, go home with your tail between your legs. So what we saw there was the Zerg army, sort of as predicted, got annihilated by the Protoss army. But disappointingly, trying to go up the ramp here was a massive fail. So how do you break this ramp? There are a variety of ways that you can do it. Method one, you have a bunch of your zealots, and instead of A-clicking them, you right-click them into this sort of area, and then you A-click in your other units. And the idea is the zealots are going to come up here, they're going to tank a lot of damage, but they will ultimately get on top of these crawlers. If you try and A-click them in, the problem is the first units up start attacking and they block the other units. So it would take a little bit of management to walk up here unless you've just got overwhelming numbers. If you've got things like Immortals, which would come out of this building, which as far as I know was built but has not produced anything yet. Immortals do a fantastic job of busting up ramps. A, because they can take a phenomenal beating before they die, and B, they do this sort of massive heavy hit damage, so they focused on things like crawlers very, very quickly indeed. So the Zerg expands at 15 minutes. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, often as a Zerg, a hatchery and expand is literally the first thing you build. I mean, my standard Zerg build is I will go up to supply cap with workers, build an overlord, and as soon as the overlord is out, I build 3 more workers, and one of those workers builds a hatchery. And that's a pretty standard Zerg opener. So literally the very first thing you do is build another hatchery, rather than wait to the 15-minute mark. Army supply then. The Protoss has twice the army. Not that he knows it, because there's a serious lack of scouting going on here. Right, carriers are good. I might speed things up a bit. Carriers are good and everybody knows it, so why not build some carriers? Because, you know, look at this pylon placement, that's genius. This pylon is in fact blocking the nexus from being built there. He's going to have to kill that if he wants to build another nexus. Does he need another nexus? With 5.5k on the bank, arguably no. What he needs is to march across the map and kill his opponent. Whoa, the bad boys are out. Ultralisks are awesome. I don't think I've ever seen somebody go 1 base ultra before. It's not something that normally happens. Ultralisks they're not cheap. But, you know, sure, you've got some money. This Ultralisk Cavern, you really need to upgrade these Ultralisks to get full effect from them. If you upgrade chitinous plating, that gives them an extra couple of armor. And the armor on Ultralisks is already a bit obscene, so you can get +5 armor, which means every shot they take is reduced, the damage it does is reduced by 5, which is just phenomenal. That makes these things incredibly tough. They are melee units, but they do splash, so these, hang on, how do you, what? Wait, what? Why doesn't my zoom in work? Darn it. Scythe.
I am unstoppable.
I think unstoppable's all one word there, but you know, hyphenate it, I'll take it. Anyway, these mighty tusks just hack stuff up in fantastic fashion. Watching Ultralisks fight against Zealots is basically, it's the sort of thing that Protoss players wake up in the night sweating about. It's horrible to see. So this is not, however, a hugely zealot heavy army. It's a sentry heavy army. Sentries against Ultralisks. I don't know. Please make it stop. Sentries are spellcasters. They fire little beams. Oh, but the Ultras aren't attacking. They're simply dancing to mock the Protoss army. Right, now the nomming starts. Nom, 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 nom. Look at the Ultras go to work. These sentries are doing nothing. Even if they did pop force fields, Ultras are massive and would walk through them. Still some more Ultra dancing. Where are the carriers? They're up here. Look at the carnage. Oh my goodness, the Ultras are dead. Well, what do you know? Without upgrades, it turns out they're not even that tough. So I think it's these hero sentries that have done the damage. That you don't often see that, a sentry with a kill. Meanwhile, the carriers have cleared the top of the ramp. I think this game's over. If you look at the army supplies, that tells a substantial.
Come for a while.
Yeah, it tells a substantial story. He's got a lot of money in the bank here for both players. So they were burrowed Ultras, were they?
Yes.
So he researched burrow, but no, like, okay.
He's not stoppable. He's
He's got a hive. You know, so there's positives to take from this. The Zerg successfully teched up to Hive on one base, and I don't know, what are the positives? Help me out here, guys. What are the positives that we can take from this?
Burrow micro.
That burrow micro, keep your ultras alive by burrowing them. Pretty awesome.
100% of the gas he collected.
He did spend 100% of the gas collected, and that is admirable. Would have been all the more admirable had he been recovering gas from maybe 12 gas extractors instead of just the 2. But, you know, all good. So GG.